What happens when a moment meant to celebrate a legacy spirals into one of the most explosive confrontations daytime television has ever witnessed? What happens when the calmest woman in Hollywood finally reaches her breaking point? And it happens live, unfiltered, in front of millions. Before we dive in, if you love intense celebrity moments, shocking on-air confrontations, and the kind of drama only Hollywood can deliver, then make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair, hit that like button, and drop a comment below. Because stories like this don't just happen, they erupt. The studio was already buzzing long before cameras rolled. The View's audience, packed to the last seat, knew something was different today. The energy was electric, restless, almost nervous. Halle Berry, the Hollywood icon adored for her elegance and strength, was scheduled to appear. It was supposed to be a celebratory interview about her new film, her legacy, and the personal hurdles she'd overcome. But backstage, even before her mic was clipped on, Halle's jaw was tight, her breathing steady but heavy, like she was bracing for something. She had been warned gently that Whoopi might bring up certain topics. Old stories, old wounds. But Halle had made one thing clear to everyone. Today, she wasn't here to be picked apart. Not again. Not by anyone. The lights dimmed. The theme music kicked in. The cameras swept across the room as the hosts took their seats. Whoopi Goldberg adjusted her glasses, leaned back, and gave that familiar smirk. The one audiences had come to know as the calm before one of her unfiltered takes. "And we are back," Whoopi announced, voice smooth, controlled. "And joining us today is an incredible actress, a trailblazer, and a woman who has seen it all. The one and only Halle Berry." Thunderous applause shook the studio. Halle walked out smiling, but it wasn't her usual soft, warm smile. Tonight, it had an edge. Determined. Guarded. She waved politely as she took her seat between Sonny and Sarah. "Welcome back to the show, Halle," Joy said, leaning in theatrically. "You look absolutely stunning as always." "Thank you," Halle replied, her voice calm, almost too calm. "It's good to be here." But Whoopi didn't waste a second. As soon as the cheers died down, she leaned forward, locking eyes with Halle. "So," Whoopi said, folding her hands, "we've all seen the headlines lately. You've been pretty open about some personal struggles, but some people think you're revisiting old drama that should have been left alone. What made you suddenly want to talk about all this again?" The audience tensed. Sonny shot Whoopi a quick sideways look. That wasn't on the pre-approved list. Halle's face didn't move, but her eyes sharpened, just slightly. "I talked about it," Halle said slowly, "because it's my truth, and sharing it helps other people feel less alone." Whoopi nodded, but it wasn't a soft nod. It was a challenging one. "But don't you think bringing up old relationships, especially ones the public has already dissected to death, is a little unnecessary? Some people think you're doing it for attention." A wave of shock rippled through the audience. A few people gasped outright. Halle's smile faded. Just like that. Gone. "I'm sorry," Halle said, turning fully toward Whoopi. "But unnecessary? You're saying my story, my pain, is unnecessary?" Whoopi didn't flinch. "I'm just saying people move on. At some point it becomes." "No," Halle's voice cut sharp through the air. "Don't do that. Don't dismiss what I've lived." The room went silent. Even the camera operators stopped shifting. Joy tried to jump in. "Well, ladies, maybe we should." But Halle raised a hand without looking at her. "No. Because I am tired of this. Tired of being told when to speak and when to shut up. Tired of having my experiences treated like some tabloid punchline." Whoopi leaned back, eyebrows raised, as if she were surprised by Halle's tone, even though she had been the one to push the button. "I'm not treating it like a punchline," Whoopi replied, voice lower now. "I'm asking what people at home are wondering. You've been in this industry for decades, Halle. You know how this works." Halle's chest rose and fell as she took a slow, steady breath. Then her voice dropped, soft but trembling with restrained anger. "You know what I know? I know that every time a woman speaks about what hurt her, someone tries to tell her she's doing it for attention. And I know that when a black woman speaks, that someone is usually another black woman expected to understand her." That line hit the studio like a shockwave. Whoopi's lips tightened. Sonny bit down on hers. Joy looked like she wanted to disappear. "Now hold on," Whoopi said, leaning forward again. "I'm not attacking you. Aren't you?" Halle shot back. Because that question wasn't curiosity. It was judgment. Murmurs filled the audience. Sarah tried to smooth things out. "Maybe we can take a step back. The point of today was to celebrate." "No, Sarah," Halle said without looking away from Whoopi. "This has been happening for years. Every interview, every panel, there's always someone trying to undermine my narrative, rewrite my intentions, reduce me to a headline. Okay, but Halle, Whoopi began. Enough. Halle's voice boomed, not loud, but powerful enough to freeze the room. Enough is enough, Whoopi. A collective gasp swept across the audience. The host table, usually a place of lively but controlled conversation, felt like it was shaking under the weight of the moment. Whoopi blinked, taken aback. Not offended, not angry, just stunned that Halle Berry, usually the composed one, the graceful one, the unshakable one, had finally snapped. I came here, Halle continued, her voice trembling with rawness, to talk about my work, my journey, not to be questioned like I owe anyone an apology for speaking my truth. Whoopi opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Halle leaned forward, eyes locked, unwavering. You don't get to police my story. Silence. Real, heavy, cinematic silence. The audience didn't move. The hosts didn't breathe. And for the first time in years on The View, Whoopi Goldberg looked shaken. Halle's hands were tight in her lap, knuckles white. Her eyes glistened, not with weakness, but with decades of held-back words. Then she whispered, almost to herself but loud enough for the world to hear. I'm done being quiet. And the cameras, rolling live, captured every heartbeat of the tension. Part 1 ends here. The air inside the studio felt different now. Dense, almost vibrating, as if every molecule had absorbed the shock of Halle Berry's outburst. The View was no stranger to heated debates, but this was something else entirely. This was a rupture. A moment no producer planned for, no publicist approved, no audience ever expected. Whoopi sat still, her fingers interlaced, her expression unreadable. She wasn't angry, not yet, but she was stunned, and that alone was enough to send a shiver through the crowd. Never in her decades on television had she been spoken to like that on her own stage. Joy Behar gave a nervous laugh that never fully formed. Well, she muttered under her breath, too close to the microphone. That escalated fast. Some audience members chuckled, but most were silent, eyes darting between Halle and Whoopi like they were watching the seconds before lightning splits a tree in half. Sunny Hostin leaned forward, trying to gently reclaim control. Halle, these conversations are important. Truly. But maybe we can. Halle didn't shift her gaze from Whoopi. Not an inch. Her voice, when she spoke again, was low but simmering with a truth she had held in for far too long. You know, she said, I didn't come here wanting to fight with you. I respect you, Whoopi. I always have. But I've spent years being polite. Years trying to be the good guest. The one who smiles no matter what's said to her. And I'm tired. Whoopi finally exhaled, a deep, weighted breath. I wasn't trying to attack you, she said slowly. I was trying to ask a question. That's my job here. No, Halle replied, her tone sharp enough to cut through the tension. Your job is to have conversations. But what you did wasn't a conversation. It was an accusation dressed up like curiosity. The audience murmured again, shifting in their seats. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. She tried again softly. Maybe we can clarify what Whoopi meant. Halle shook her head. I know exactly what she meant. I've been in this industry for decades. I'm used to the tone people take when they think they know better than me about my own life. Whoopi's lips pressed together. For the first time, the faintest flicker of frustration crossed her face. Halle, she said, you came on this show many times before. You know how we talk here. We don't sugarcoat things. And I don't need sugarcoating, Halle shot back. I need respect. The word hit the table with force. Respect. It echoed in the stunned silence. Even the studio lights seemed to dim at its weight. Whoopi leaned forward, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in a firm attempt to regain her footing. I do respect you, she said. But I'm allowed to question a narrative the public is talking about. That's what we do here. And I'm allowed, Halle replied, to call it out when it crosses a line. Joy, always the one to poke at a fire she shouldn't, opened her mouth to lighten the mood. Maybe we should all take a deep breath, then. Joy, Whoopi cut her off without looking. Not now. Joy snapped shut, blinking rapidly. A low ripple of surprise moved across the studio. Even Halle's eyes flicked over for a brief second. The tension wasn't just between Halle and Whoopi anymore. Now it was swallowing the whole table. Sunny tried once more. We're all on the same side here, she said calmly. Every woman at this table has faced criticism, scrutiny, judgment. That's the point, Halle said, turning briefly toward her. We know what it feels like. Which is why it hurt to hear that question from you, she added, looking back at Whoopi. For the first time, Whoopi's face softened. Too slightly for most to notice, but not slightly enough for Halle to miss it. I wasn't trying to make you feel dismissed, Whoopi said quietly. But when you put something out into the world, people will react to it. And I'm not afraid of reactions, Halle replied. I'm afraid of being told that speaking my truth is attention-seeking. I've had enough men say that. Enough tabloids. I didn't expect it from you. A hush fell again. That one landed deep. Whoopi blinked, her jaw tensing, but she didn't interrupt. Halle's voice trembled, just once, as she continued. Do you know how many years I stayed silent because I didn't want to be labeled difficult? How many times I let interviewers say outrageous things because I didn't want to be the angry black woman? How many times I swallowed my reality just to keep the peace? Her voice cracked, just barely. The audience felt it. I'm done swallowing it, she said. Whoopi slowly removed her glasses, pinched the bridge of her nose, then set them on the table. When she looked up, her tone had changed, less defensive, more weary. Halle, nobody wants you silent. Certainly not me. But you have to understand, when we ask these questions, we're not always judging. Sometimes we're just asking. And sometimes, Halle answered, the way you ask is the problem. The crowd reacted instantly, soft gasps, a few murmurs of agreement, a few shaking heads. Sarah shifted awkwardly in her chair. Joy scratched her head. Sunny's expression tightened, thoughtful. Whoopi looked down at her hands, then up at Halle again. So what do you want from me? She asked, voice calm but edged. What would have been the right way to approach this? Halle took a breath. A long, steady breath. Then she spoke with a clarity that seemed to crystallize the entire confrontation. Ask me why I chose to speak. Not why I didn't stay silent. The studio fell silent once more. It was such a simple distinction, but such a powerful one. And everyone in the room felt it like a shift in gravity. Whoopi didn't look angry now. She looked reflective, considering, maybe even respecting the pushback, though she'd never say so out loud, not yet. Joy finally broke the silence with a small, hesitant laugh. I mean, that's actually a good point. No one responded. The atmosphere around the table was thick, electric, but no longer spiraling. It was shifting, becoming something raw and honest instead of simply explosive. Halle leaned back in her chair, exhaling for the first time in minutes. Her hands trembled slightly, but she hid them beneath the edge of the table. Whoopi adjusted her glasses again, as if grounding herself. All right, she said. Let's reset. Let's move forward. But even she knew, everyone knew, the interview had left the realm of simple daytime conversation. Something had snapped open. Something deeper. Something irreversible. And part 2 ends with the table teetering between reconciliation and a second, even bigger explosion. One that neither woman saw coming yet. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. Even the cameras seemed to hum quieter, as if they too sensed that whatever was about to happen next would decide whether this moment went down in TV history as a confrontation or a full-on implosion. Whoopi inhaled deeply, adjusting her seat. Halle sat poised, her jaw still tight, but her eyes softer now, no longer burning with immediate rage, but with something deeper. Hurt. Exhaustion. Resolve. Okay, Whoopi said finally, her tone steady. Let's talk about it the right way. The audience shifted, thankful for what looked like a de-escalation, though the tension still hung sharp in the air, like a knife suspended at eye level. Sarah offered a tentative smile. That sounds good, she said, trying to inject a bit of warmth. Let's reset. But Joy, ever someone who should think before she speaks but almost never does, chimed in with a half-joke that hit the wrong note instantly. Well, at least this'll get us some ratings. A few people in the audience laughed, but neither Halle nor Whoopi even blinked. Sunny shot Joy a look that practically screamed, "Not now, Joy." The air tightened again. Halle leaned forward slightly, hands clasped tightly together, voice controlled but shaking at the edges. "I'm not here to create a moment," she said quietly. "I'm here because for years the narrative around me has been shaped by everyone but me." Whoopi nodded slowly. "And that's why we want to hear your voice." "Do you?" Halle asked, one eyebrow raised. "Because from where I'm sitting, it felt like you were questioning why I chose to use it." That line made the audience gasp again. Whoopi held her gaze. "I was questioning the timing. There's a difference." "Timing?" Halle repeated, stunned. "The timing is when I'm ready, not when the world is." Sarah whispered under her breath, "Oh boy." But Halle wasn't done. "People forget that public figures are still people," she said. "We bleed. We break. We heal on our own clock. I didn't wake up one day and say, "Hey, let me stir up drama." I revisited my past because I'm finally strong enough to do it without collapsing. A few claps came from the audience, small but supportive. Whoopi noticed them, then looked back at Halle with a subtle shift in her expression. Something that resembled understanding, though it wasn't quite acceptance yet. "That's fair," Whoopi said slowly. "But you have to admit, when you revisit certain things, the media will run with it. You've been doing this long enough to know how these cycles go." Halle leaned back, eyes piercing. "And why is that my burden to carry? Why is the narrative always that I should stay silent because they might twist it?" The question slammed into the table like a gavel. Sunny nodded subtly, murmuring, "She has a point." But Whoopi wasn't backing down. Not fully. Not yet. Because Whoopi replied, "We live in a world where everything you say can be weaponized. And I've seen women get eaten alive by the headlines. I've watched it happen for decades." Halle's eyes softened, just slightly. There it was. The first hint of common ground. "So what?" Halle asked softly. "I should stay quiet to protect myself from the world's reaction? Haven't we been doing that long enough? Haven't you been doing that at times in your career?" A moment of silence. A heavy, unblinking moment. Whoopi swallowed. Sunny looked between them, stunned by the raw honesty. Sarah's eyes widened, surprised Halle had gone so direct. Joy pretended to shuffle her cards, but was clearly listening. The audience sat frozen. For the first time since the confrontation began, Whoopi looked genuinely reflective. A tiny crack in her armor. "I'm not saying you should silence yourself," Whoopi said finally, voice lower. "I'm saying I know what happens when you speak. I know how ugly it can get. I've lived it. I've been dragged, misquoted, torn apart." Her voice trembled, just faintly, but enough for Halle to notice. "And maybe," Whoopi continued, "maybe I ask that question because I worry about what it does to someone. Even someone as strong as you." That admission hung in the air, unexpected and raw. Halle blinked, stunned. The audience murmured softly. Sunny raised her brows, surprised by the depth. Sarah whispered, "Wow." Joy opened her mouth to say something, but then thought better and closed it again. Halle leaned forward, her voice gentler now. "Whoopi, if that's the case, you could have said that. You could have led with concern instead of judgment." Whoopi didn't look away. "Maybe I worded it wrong." "Maybe you did," Halle said. "But I can hear what you meant now." The studio felt like it was thawing, but not fully. Not yet. There was still something bubbling beneath the surface. Halle could feel it. So could Whoopi. Halle took a slow breath, then said, "You know, it's hard. Being on camera. Being picked apart. People think celebrities don't feel things, but we do. We feel everything." The crowd murmured in agreement. "Every headline," Halle continued. "Every rumor. Every joke. Every story about us that we didn't get to tell. And when we finally tell it, finally, someone says it's too late or too much or too dramatic." Whoopi's eyes lowered. "I get it. But you questioned it," Halle said, not accusing, just stating. "And it hurt. Because of who it came from." Whoopi looked up again. There it was. The heart of it. The spark that ignited everything. The room felt warm, heavy, tender, like the moment before a long overdue truth finally breaks through. Whoopi nodded slowly. "Then let me say it plain. I didn't mean to hurt you." The audience softened, a collective exhale sweeping through them. Halle nodded back. "And I didn't want to explode like that. But you pushed me to a place I've been avoiding for a long time." Another silence. Not tense this time. Meaningful. But before the tension could fully settle, Joy suddenly jumped in, completely misreading the delicacy of the moment. "Well, ladies," she said with forced cheer. "This is great TV, but can we maybe?" Halle whipped her head toward her so fast the audience gasped. "Joy," Halle said sharply. "Not everything is about making good TV." Joy froze, wide-eyed. The audience murmured, some shocked, some cheering under their breath. That's when the producers began waving frantically from behind the cameras. The segment was nearly over. Time was running out. And the truth was, the most explosive moment hadn't even arrived yet. Because while Halle and Whoopi seemed to be inching toward mutual understanding, something unspoken was still simmering. Something neither had addressed. Something about the real reason Halle had been pushed to this breaking point. And as the music cue signaled the final segment ahead, both women knew. The real storm was still coming. The segment returned from commercial break with the audience still buzzing, still whispering, still stunned by what they'd witnessed. The lights came back up bright, washing the table in a harsh glow that made every tension line, every flicker of emotion, every unspoken word vibrate with new intensity. Halle's breathing had steadied, but her shoulders held a quiet stiffness, as though she was braced for impact. Whoopi sat straighter now, glasses perched back on, her expression controlled yet wary. Everyone at the table sensed it. Something unresolved was pushing its way toward the surface. The camera fanned across the hosts just as Sarah attempted to jump in with a cheerful tone that did not match the atmosphere at all. "Well, we're back," she said with a tight smile. "And we're hoping to finish strong." Halle's voice cut through her words, soft but firm. "Actually, before we move forward, there's something I still need to say." Sarah's smile dropped instantly. The audience went silent. Whoopi's eyes flickered upward as Halle turned fully toward her. "You asked why I chose this moment to speak about my past," Halle said calmly. "But what people don't know is, I didn't choose this moment." Whoopi frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Halle's jaw flexed. Her hands curled together in her lap. She glanced briefly at Sunny, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. Halle took a breath. "I've been speaking quietly about my story for years," she said. "In small circles. In interviews where the questions were gentle. In safe spaces. But recently, people have been twisting it, misquoting it, turning it into something ugly. And you know what hurt the most?" She paused. The audience leaned forward. Seeing another woman, another black woman, question it on national television as if I'm doing something wrong, when all I'm trying to do is heal. Whoopi inhaled sharply, hurt flashing across her face. Not anger. Not defensiveness. Hurt. "Halle," Whoopi said slowly, "that wasn't my intention." "Maybe not," Halle replied. "But the impact is still there." The room felt like it was trembling again, emotion this time, not rage. "I've been through things," Halle continued, voice trembling. "Things I haven't talked about, things I've hinted at, things I've buried for decades. And every time I open up, even just a little, people jump to judge, to label, to question. I'm done letting people decide whether my truth is valid." Her eyes glistened. Whoopi swallowed hard. She wasn't blinking anymore. "And I'm done," Halle said with finality, "letting even the people I admire make me feel like I need permission to speak." It was quiet. Deeply, overwhelmingly quiet. Then Whoopi leaned in, her voice softer than it had been all day. "Halle, you're right." The audience shifted. Joy blinked. Sarah raised her brows. Sunny froze. Whoopi continued, her tone stripped of ego. "You're right. Sometimes I push too hard. Sometimes I forget that these aren't just headlines. They're your life. And I'm sorry if I made you feel unheard or dismissed." Gasps echoed around the room. The apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't grand. It was human. Unexpected. Raw. Halle's eyes widened slightly. Whoopi gave a small, almost invisible shrug. "I'm human. I get it wrong. And I got it wrong today." The room exhaled. For a moment, it felt like the storm had finally softened. Like the turbulence had calmed. But Halle wasn't just seeking an apology. She had one more truth to drop. One she'd held onto for years. "There's something else," she said. Whoopi looked at her, attentive now. Respectful. "I've watched you for years," Halle said. "You were one of the women who gave me hope early in my career. Hope that I could be bold, that I could be outspoken, that I could be myself. So when you questioned my motives today, it cut deeper than anything a tabloid could ever print." Whoopi's face softened, real emotion now, no performance. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to," Halle said. "But now you do." The audience wasn't breathing. Joy, for once, had nothing to say. Sunny's eyes shone with quiet empathy. Sarah swallowed hard, emotional herself. Halle finally let her hands rest openly on the table, her voice steady. "I'm not here to fight you, Whoopi. I'm here to remind people, anyone watching, that our truth is ours. And no one gets to tell us when to heal or how to speak." Whoopi nodded slowly. "And I respect that." Halle exhaled, a long, trembling breath of release. Then, unexpectedly, Whoopi extended her hand across the table. Not for the cameras. Not for the optics. For Halle. The room gasped. Halle looked at the hand. Looked at Whoopi. And then, with a calm that felt like a final exhale after years of holding her breath, she took it. The studio burst into applause, loud, emotional, overwhelming. A standing ovation from half the audience. Cheers echoing against the rafters. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the exact moment two powerful women, once colliding, found common ground in front of millions. But the producers were waving frantically again. They still needed to close the segment. Sarah cleared her throat, overwhelmed. Wow, I don't think any of us expected where this conversation would go today. Joy nodded too quickly. Well, that's the view for you. Sunny smiled warmly. This is what real conversations look like. Whoopi chuckled, tired but sincere. And sometimes they're harder than we expect. Halle looked around the table, then out at the audience, her voice softer now. But they matter. The applause rose again. The final seconds of the segment ticked down. The camera zoomed slowly outward as the emotional electricity settled into something gentler, something meaningful, something unforgettable. When the show finally cut to its closing theme, the audience was still buzzing. People grabbed their phones, tweeting, posting, recording their thoughts before even leaving their seats. Hashtags were already trending. Clips were flying across social media. Within minutes, headlines exploded. Halle Berry breaks silence in live showdown. Whoopi Goldberg stunned by Halle's raw truth. The View erupts in emotional confrontation. By the time Halle left the studio, her name was trending in over 20 countries. Whoopi's statement from the table was circulating on every entertainment feed. Fans, critics, celebrities, everyone was talking. And as Halle stepped into her car, her final whisper to herself, captured by no camera but heard by every viewer through the rawness of the moment, was simple. I'm finally free. And that was the moment the world knew Halle Berry wasn't just speaking her truth. She was owning it,